Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Dr. Leo Nissola, author of Systemic Lupus, a guide for physicians. Dr. Leo, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Paul. Thanks for having me.
We are thrilled to have you on the show. Are you ready to get started?
Let's get started.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Great question. First, I believe that perseverance is a miracle-working virtue. So if you have it, you can accomplish pretty much anything. One advice that I would give is to outline a plan, to develop a strategy, and to research every single angle of the specific topic you're planning to write about. Consult with people who have done similar work, but go after the uncharted water and explore new pathways. Also, I would say knock on as many doors as it takes to get your word across. And one important thing to keep in mind is that when people say that something cannot be done, they're mostly talking about themselves. So if you think you can do it, go for it.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think that generating ideas and creating a meaningful work that would trigger interest in other people, it is challenging. One of the hardest parts, I think, is making yourself known and showcasing your work, especially to publishing houses. That can be difficult, and if you don't have the proper context, that can impose a challenge. Now with social media, the degrees of separation have shattered, and key opinion leaders that used to be very far away from your network are now on Twitter, and they are very open to communication. So I would say get out there, communicate, and there's no other way. If you don't communicate where you're going after, you can't get anything done.
And then with your book, did you go through a publisher or did you publish the book yourself?
I went through a publisher. We were lucky enough to have had a very successful launch. And one of the key success factors was that I connected with very seasoned colleagues and asked them to spread a word about the book and the idea about the book before the book actually became a thing. So we were lucky enough to have that in our hand.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Yeah, as I was just saying, I think the number one key factor for the success was to spread the word about the book. So when we started discussing the idea, we actually gained momentum by having a lot of people talking about what this book should be like. And so even before it became a book, people were already expecting this sort of publication. So at the day of our launch, we had a couple of hundred people showing up, and we sold out pretty quickly. So I would say, make yourself known, talk to your friends, your colleagues, your family. Now use social media to engage a broader audience. Things can be a bit more formal in LinkedIn, but Twitter is a very powerful tool that doctors should use more often.
So let's take a little deeper dive into Twitter, because you've mentioned that a couple times in our broadcast today. So could you tell us some specific Twitter strategies that you utilized?
I think first you have to know who your broader audience is and who your peers are and who are your mentors. So people who you aspire to be or people that you admire, you should keep engaging and addressing them and asking them questions. And look, consulting fees are very expensive. And if you can get that key opinion leader to share their thoughts with you on Twitter, you're getting that for free.
And then how were you reaching out? Were you sending direct messages? Were you responding on comments of posts? What was your communication strategy?
So usually people can, reply very easily on through direct messages, but by retweeting or them and asking them a question, or sending them comments on their posts, that would be a strategy that I think now in 2019 can be used. I wish I had that back in 2013, but I didn't.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the whole retreating strategy?
I think one of the things that it is important to do is to keep your network online as you would want it to be on your real life too. So I would usually engage with people that I admire, people that I aspire to become one day, and I try to engage them in the way that I feel they would like to be engaged on, which is scientifically. So if they publish the important paper, I would read it. I would have my thoughts together about it, and I would either retweet or ask them a personal question on their professional work via direct messages, for example.
And then with the direct messages, what was typically your response rate?
100%. I don't think there
Nice.
is anything that it is left unanswered now. At the end of the day, there are normal people that do normal work and they love to see their work valued. So if you're engaging people on a professional manner, by the work that they have developed, I think is it is a good, smart way to engage, opinion leaders.
Well, in your strategy too, it was very targeted. So specifically, who were the main people that you were targeting for the demographic that you were looking for?
Well, so basically, I didn't do that for my book because I published the book in 2013 and I wasn't on Twitter back then. But I would say for the person that is trying to publish now, to engage people who are actually their target audience,
Mhm.
and most importantly, opinion leaders on the field of expertise for that author.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Great question. I think I'm very passionate about books, whether that is reading or writing them. My favorite book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. He is a Brazilian author. He has sold roughly 35 million copies of this book, and he thinks his books are inspiring and life-changing, but he doesn't think of himself as a self-help writer, but mostly a self-problem writer. So he writes about challenges that he has gone through life. One of the key things about this book that talks about dreams and listening to your heart and going after what you're passionate about is that your success at the end of the day has a ripple effect. That's what alchemists do. So they show that when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. So growth, change, and evolution are weaved into the fabrics of this reality. And I think that's one of the key messages that I got is number one, the fear is your primary obstacle. It's an obstacle in itself, so you shouldn't start a journey in fear. Um, but also to embrace, the present and go after what actually you're passionate about, because eventually you'd have to make a decision on which pathway to go, and that will make all the difference.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
So, bridging to my last answer, I think my favorite quote is from Robert Frost's work on The Road Not Taken. I was in Boston for a course when I entered Harvard Medical School's library, and I picked up one book and I opened the exact page of this intriguing poem. It reads, "Two roads diverge into a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." I stood there perplexed by how much those words moved me. And it was clear to me that I had taken the road less traveled and I had embarked on the journey of my own. So I've kept that quote very close to my heart. And up to today, when something it is puzzling my mind, I usually do take the bold, disruptive approach rather than the most traveled path.
Dr. Leo, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show today. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Thank you so much for having me. I think if your followers want to follow me on Twitter, I'm easily found at Leo Nissola MD.
Dr. Leo, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul. Have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.